Hello, I'm Dr. Prince Maurice Parker, and welcome to our study on Genesis, entitled Understanding Genesis. This is lesson number 8. So we're going to continue this study, and I believe today I'll probably give the first half of this. I'm going to divide this into two parts, and the second part of this same study will be lesson number 9 for today. Well, Genesis 1 is ancient cosmology. And as Dr. John H. Walton, Old Testament professor emeritus at Wheaton College and former professor at Moody Bible Institute, accurately confirms that ancient cosmology is function-oriented. He has written 2 books on Genesis. Well, at least I have 2 of his books on Genesis. They're excellent books. Of course, we're going to deviate on certain schools of thought, but that's totally normal in academia as we study and we get into details of the book. But I want to add that ancient cosmology, especially in Genesis 1, is also purpose-oriented. What we want to look at today, and at least in part, is that purpose. The purpose of Genesis 1 is not so much to speak of the marvels of the cosmos, that they do glorify God, but they tell us why Jesus Christ, Genesis 1, tells us why Jesus Christ had to come to earth in his incarnated form. This is what we're talking about. It gives the whole account. Of course, we're talking about a summarized account of the creation and the 7 days, or the 6 days of creation and the 7th day of rest. We're talking about the creation of life on the earth, as the universe had its bed of sheet long before, as we have seen. Therefore, this chapter ends with the reason that Christ came to earth. Now, why did Christ come to earth? Because he created man, and it was an eventuality. He knew he had a contingency plan for his creature that he created. This is zenith of the creation. He created him with free will. Chapter 1 was written with the foreknowledge that humanity did fall into sin and would be in need of a Savior. Now, we're going to talk a bit about this foreknowledge and about free will. But in our previous study, we also saw that God created humans on the 6th day of creation, of course. And we begin here today when he said, I have provided all kinds of grain and all kinds of fruit for you to eat. But for all the wild animals and for all the birds, I have provided grass and leafy plants for food. And it was done. That's Genesis chapter 1, verses 29 and 30. And that's from the Good News Bible. Now, he concluded that day by saying every life form that he created was to be herbivorous. The animals were not supposed to kill one another as prey because death was never a part of God's original plan for the creation. God did not create life on the earth to kill one another and depend on one another for sustenance. Now, I'm not pushing a vegan diet or vegetarianism. I'm just giving you the account, the biblical account of how things were in its original state. Now, Isaiah chapter 11, verses 1 to 10, is what I call an intermittent prophecy. An intermittent prophecy is a prophecy that comes in the middle of another dialogue, or it might come into a middle of another prophecy that was intended for another time. But here we have a prophecy with double purpose. And so you have what I call, it's just put in there because God had wanted to put that message there for a double purpose, or for us, or for a future time. A prophecy that suddenly emerges in the middle of a message concerning another subject. That would be an intermittent prophecy. This is not an atypical occurrence in the writing of the prophets. It happens quite frequently, and we'll see it especially in Isaiah. Now, Isaiah chapter 11, verses 6 to 9, it says, it talks about this original creation, but it talks about the reestablishment when God creates the new heavens and the new earth after the resurrection of the righteous, the resurrection of the dead, and everything we leave in Revelations. But look what it says when God recreates the earth. It says, and wolves and sheep shall live together in peace, and leopards will lie down with young goats. Calves and lion cubs will feed together, and little children will take care of them. Cows and bears will eat together, and their calves and cubs will lie down in peace. Lions will eat straw, as do cattle. Even a baby will not be harmed if it plays near a poisonous snake. On Zion, God's sacred hill, there will be nothing harmful or evil. The land will be as full of the knowledge of the Lord as the seas are full of water. Now you might say, what about poisonous? Why did snakes have poison? Well, what is now a toxin to us could also have had originally another purpose altogether, but now it is a toxin. Isaiah chapter 65, verses 17 to 25. These verses reiterate the prophecy once again. It speaks of the new heavens and the new earth, to wit, the restoration of all that was lost with humanity's fall into sin. So, concerning our subject, he says, wolves and lambs, once again, will feed together, and lions will eat straw like oxen, and dust will be the food for snakes, and they will not hurt or destroy anyone anywhere in my holy mountain, says the Lord. Isaiah chapter 65, verse 25. I have no idea what it's talking about. Dust will be the food for snakes, but there are animals that do live, get their nutrients from the soil. So they had a different constitution and at that time, and they will once again reacquire that constitution. And then that's from the GW, the God Word translation. If death was never in God's plan or will for his creation, why did he put the tree of knowledge of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden? Why did death was never his plan? That was never his will. God never wanted man to fall in sin, but yet we find as part of the creation, God put a tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. Why did he do that? If it wasn't in his plan. Why? Because God made humans with the power of free will, the power of choice. And where there is no choice, there is no love. God gave us the opportunity to choose whether we wanted to love him or not. And that's the only way you can have true love, is when there is choice. Love is not an emotion. Now, in my classes at the seminary, at the theological seminary, I usually bring this up in second year, that love is not an emotion. And we have a protracted discussion, always. All emotions are extremely ephemeral. But love never dies. Emotions are provoked by biochemical reactions, hormones, and different things like that. But love is a decision. Now, if love was not a decision, how could God command us to love our enemy, or even love him, if this were not so? It's a decision. We choose to love God. We choose to love our enemies. You're never going to have an emotion, a positive emotion enough that will have you love your enemy. That's not a natural reaction. So God asks us to choose to love. One chooses to love or not to love. I will reiterate, emotions are hormone-driven and extremely ephemeral, but love never dies. This is why people who have based their love on emotions, they say, well, I don't love you anymore. Well, love never dies. Love is a decision. And this is why in your wedding vows, you vow, you commit, you make a decision in sickness and in health. But if your love is emotionally driven, events can change those emotions. But never, if you are a person of decision, it won't change. Events will not change that decision. And so even though death was never a part of God's original plan for humanity or any part of his creation, that doesn't mean he didn't have a contingency plan. God is omniscient. He's aware. Now, we have to understand this. Our lives are not merely a single road with just a fork in it. No. That's overly simplistic. Sure, there are forks that we shall continually encounter, but every fork you encounter, every decision that you have to select in your life. Sometimes they come out countless times in a day. But it's not just one fork. You come to that place as a result of other forks. Every decision that we make has consequences. These are consequences that affect us and in turn affect others around us, along with every other decision that we make. It's not like you never see a tree, or rarely will see a tree with just two branches. There's going to be dozens or hundreds or thousands of branches that will extend from that tree. And so this is rather what our free will looks like. When our decisions are twisted, they drag us down. The tendency is to blame God. Well, God, why did you do this? But these are all results of our decisions. Now, what the truth is, it's all us, all the time, because they are our decisions. Remember that thing about free will? Well, that's it. And so the results of our life and things are not really blamable on God. We have made decisions that have brought us to X point in our life. Now, there are some things that we don't count on. An accident, a drunk driver, or something like that. No, those are other things. That's a subject for another day, but they're good questions. You have to ask those questions. Very good questions, but yet they do not exclude God. You still have to make the decision of how you're going to resolve and how you're going to handle emotionally, psychologically, intellectually, how you're going to handle the decisions that you make within yourself and in your life, even if it seems like an unjust tragedy. God's in control yet. These are subjects that I'm bringing up, but sure, you can have intense conversations about those, but God always has a plan. That might not have been his will, but God, because no will that a drunk person would get behind a will. It's not even his will that that person would have been inebriated in the first place. But we'll see how this comes out. Continuing with our theme, his omniscience doesn't mean that he knows exactly what you're going to do at any given time, because that's your decision. Nevertheless, he knows every possible outcome of any decision you will ever have to make in your life. In other words, if you choose the right hand, he knows what the other decisions you're going to have, or what could possibly come up, and whatever choice you make, he knows what the result of that will be. And so, like every contingency of any decision you make, God knows the possible outcomes. But the choice is always yours, and he knows where to go from there, or where you will go, or what's before you there. And that's exactly how he is omniscient. He doesn't choose for you what you're going to do. And the choice, as far as if you want to say he doesn't know, he knows your possibilities, but the choice is yours. Now get this. This is not rocket science as far as our will is concerned, because it's always our decision. The Bible expressly states that death is an enemy of God, let's say. So it was never in his plan. God never, when he made all animals herbivorous, he wasn't thinking that animals would have to take a life in order to survive for sustenance. No, that was never in his plan. But now that sin has entered, and by sin, death, the Bible, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, 26, it says, the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. In other words, enemy is hated, this enemy, death, is hated by God. God did not want death ever to be a part of his creation, but now that it has entered in because of man's decision, it is Hosea chapter 13, verse 14 says, I will deliver them out of the hand of death. I will redeem them from death. This is talking about the final resurrection and when God will finally recreate the earth for those who have overcome. But look I love this part of the verse. O death, I will be thy death. O hell, I will be thy bite. Comfort is hidden from my eyes. In other words, God will exact vengeance upon the spirit of death. And that's the DRB translation. And I think it says it quite well, but that's several translations capture that verse quite accurately. In Romans chapter 5, verse 12, the Bible tells us that death is here only because of humanity's sin. Sin came into the world through one man, and his sin brought death with it. As a result, death has spread to the whole human race because everyone has sinned. I don't think there's anybody within the sound of my voice today that has not sinned. Nobody can say that they haven't sinned. So it's all been our decision, our choice to sin. Now, nevertheless, even though sin and death were not a part of God's original plan, he also had a contingency plan. Let's take a look at this. I have a question for you. As we conclude Genesis chapter 1, what is the first commandment? Think about it. What is the first commandment mentioned in the Bible, but in reality is the fourth commandment that was given? I will reiterate that. What is the first commandment mentioned in the Bible, but actually was the fourth commandment that was given? Remember, anytime God gives an instruction, it is never a suggestion. It's a commandment. If it proceeds from his mouth, we are to live by it. So, what did the crown of God's creation do with this command, this first command that's mentioned, but the fourth that was given? Did they have time to obey? We're going to address these and other questions as we study Genesis 2 in our series, Understanding Genesis.